Our little wooden cottage nestled deep within a secluded valley in the English countryside. When we moved in, we both dreamt of an idyllic life, far removed from the hustle and bustle of the city. This tiny farm was all we had, but it offered a sense of peace I had never experienced before. A few chickens clucked merrily in the mornings. A flock of pure white geese swam in the small pond behind the house, and a pair of lazy old cats basked in the sun on the porch steps. Everything was slow, quiet, like a serene pastoral painting. But then that simplicity began to unravel little by little, like a small crack spreading across the surface of an antique vase. The geese started to disappear. First just one, then two, then an entire flock. There were no traces left behind. They weren't torn apart, no feathers were scattered, and there were no strange footprints around the coop. The old wooden gate was always carefully latched every evening, and the soft mud surrounding it never bore the imprint of any intruders. They simply vanished as if lifted away by an invisible hand in the night. We tried to find a reasonable explanation. Foxes? Wild dogs? But the truth was there was no evidence of any such creatures. David, my husband, even stayed up several nights to watch, but all he saw was the still darkness and the chirping of insects. Worry began to creep into our minds, sowing a vague sense of unease. After a few weeks, only one goose remained. It was the oldest one, its white feathers tinged with a pale yellow. Since the others had disappeared, it had become incredibly anxious. Its cries echoed across the farm, a high-pitched, mournful sound as if lamenting its lost companions. It paced back and forth in the coop, its long neck craned to one side, its black eyes constantly darting around in fear. One evening, as I was feeding it the last of the corn kernels, a sudden cold gust of wind blew through, tangling in my hair, making me shiver even though the weather was completely still. The goose suddenly fell silent. It lifted its small head, its black eyes widening, fixed on the space behind me with utter terror. In those eyes, I saw a primal horror, a fear that words couldn't describe. My heart clenched. A cold sensation spread through my body. I slowly turned around, trying to reassure myself that there was nothing there. Just a frightened goose, a sudden breeze. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Darkness enveloped the garden behind the house, the tall trees swaying gently, creating eerie shapes. I strained my eyes into the darkness but saw nothing, only a terrifying stillness and the soft rustling of leaves. The next morning, the last goose was gone. The coop was empty, with only a few dry straws and a scattering of white feathers left behind. Silence blanketed the farm, a heavy, terrifying silence more unsettling than any noise. The chickens' morning clucking seemed fainter, weaker. The old cats had also become more timid, hiding inside the house all day, only daring to peek out cautiously. Now, I have trouble sleeping every night. The darkness outside the windows seems thicker, concealing something dark and unpredictable. Sometimes, in the dead of night, when everything is suffocatingly silent, I hear the faint flapping of wings somewhere near the empty goose pen. A soft sound, almost inaudible, but enough to make my heart pound in my chest. It doesn't sound like a goose's wings, but something else, lighter, faster, as if a large bird is circling in the darkness. And that feeling, that cold and unsettling feeling like someone is watching me, it's always there. Whether I'm inside the house or in the garden, day or night, I always feel an invisible gaze following my every move from the shadows. Sometimes, when I turn my back, I have the fleeting sensation of seeing something dart out of the corner of my eye, a blurry dark shape dissolving into the air. David tries to reassure me, saying I'm just being overly anxious. He suggests that maybe a weasel or some other predator found a way to sneak onto the farm. But I know deep in my heart that this isn't a normal animal. The way the geese disappeared, the utter terror in the last goose's eyes, and this cold, haunting feeling, it all points to something else, something much darker and more sinister. Tonight, the moon is full and round, casting an eerie light over the garden. I sit by the window looking out at the empty goose pen. A gentle breeze rustles through the trees, creating soft, whispering sounds. Suddenly, I hear the familiar flapping of wings, but this time it's clearer, closer. I hold my breath, straining my eyes into the darkness. A large dark shadow flits across the yard, its wings spread strangely wide, then disappears into the ancient trees behind the house. I couldn't see clearly what it was, but that shadow, the sudden cold that enveloped me, and that soft yet haunting flapping of wings, it has filled me with utter dread. I know we are not alone on this farm, and whatever is lurking in the darkness, it's getting closer. The peace we sought has turned into a silent terror, and I fear that one day it will be our turn to disappear without a trace in the terrifying silence of this countryside. I spent my younger years wandering through various farms, from the endless golden wheat fields to the orchards laden with ripe apples. Each place held its own unique beauty and hardship, but there was one farm, hidden deep in the remote mountains, the memory of which still haunts me to this day. Initially, when I first arrived, everything seemed as normal as any other place. The farm work was hard, from early morning until late at night, but in return, the surrounding natural scenery was truly majestic and magnificent. Towering, deep green mountains stretched into the distance, babbling brooks flowed through rocky crevices, and the air was fresh and unusually still. However, little by little, I began to notice strange things, small details that nonetheless planted an indescribable sense of unease in my heart. The farm owner, a gaunt old man with a deeply lined face and perpetually sad eyes, was incredibly quiet. He often looked at me with a strange, probing gaze as if trying to read my very soul. Whenever I asked about anything related to the farm or the land, he would usually evade the question or answer vaguely, only fueling my curiosity and anxiety. As night fell and the pale moonlight filtered through the ancient trees, the old wooden house would emit strange noises. These weren't the normal creaks and groans of an old wooden house, but something much different. Sometimes I would hear someone whispering softly as if speaking in a language I had never heard before. Other times there would be the sound of light footsteps in the attic, even though I was certain that no one was up there. The feeling of loneliness and unease would envelop me like a thick black curtain, always leaving me with the sense that a dark secret was hidden deep within these decaying wooden walls. One night, I woke up to a sudden coldness spreading through my body. Moonlight shone through the crack in the window, casting pale streaks of light on the floor. I shifted slightly, and then I suddenly saw a figure standing at the foot of my bed. It was just a blurry shadow, indistinct in shape, but it radiated a chilling coldness as if the very breath of death was on the back of my neck. My heart pounded in my chest, my throat tightened, and I tried to call out, to scream, but no sound would come. My whole body felt frozen, only my eyes wide open, staring in horror at the ghostly shadow. After what felt like an eternity, the shadow slowly dissolved into the darkness, leaving behind a terrifying silence in the room. I lay still in bed, cold sweat pouring out, my whole body trembling. I couldn't sleep a wink for the rest of the night, the image of the blurry shadow haunting my mind. The next morning, with a haggard face and dark circles under my eyes, I went to the farm owner and told him what I had seen the night before. He just shook his head slowly, his sad eyes looking at me with pity. "You were dreaming, boy," he said in a hoarse voice. "It was a very quiet night, nothing strange happened." But I knew what I had seen. That bone-chilling coldness, that haunting blurry shadow couldn't have been a dream. From that night on, the feeling of unease grew even stronger, clinging to me like a shadow. I couldn't sleep soundly, always waking up startled in the middle of the night with a racing heart. I felt like someone was watching me, lurking in the shadows, waiting for something. Finally, after a few weeks of living in fear and unease, I decided to leave that terrifying farm. I couldn't bear the gloomy atmosphere, the strange sounds in the night, and especially the ghostly shadow I had seen any longer. I knew that if I stayed there for even one more day, I might go mad. Even now, whenever I recall those days on that remote farm, I can't help but shudder. I never found out what the shadow I saw that night was or what the strange sounds in the night meant. But I know one thing for sure, there was something dark and terrifying that existed in that place, and I was lucky to have escaped before it swallowed me whole. It has been many years since I left my family's farm, but the bone-chilling cold of that autumn still haunts me like a ghost. We called the farm Whispering Pines, nestled deep in the remote countryside of Ireland, where golden barley fields stretched as far as the eye could see, and towering pine trees rustled in the wind like mysterious whispers. I grew up there amidst the smell of damp earth after the rain, the bleating of sheep in the barn, and the warm laughter of my parents by the hearth. Life wasn't wealthy, but it was simple and peaceful, a picture of rural life I thought would last forever. But that autumn, an omen cast a dark shadow over that beautiful picture. First came the crop failures. The barley wouldn't sprout, and the potatoes rotted in the ground. Then came the livestock. Our healthy dairy cows suddenly became thin, weak, and died inexplicably as if an invisible hand had squeezed the life out of them. We called the vet, but he just shook his head, his eyes filled with sadness and helplessness. After that, the strange things began. On moonless nights, when darkness enveloped the farm, we started hearing the sound of horse hooves echoing from the empty fields. The hooves pounded rapidly, powerfully, like a troop of cavalry galloping. But when we rushed out to see, there was only thick fog and the silent rows of pine trees. Not a footprint, not a breath, just an eerie silence and the hairs standing up on the back of our necks. Sometimes, on still nights, we would also see flickering lights in the abandoned stable. The stable had rotted with time, its tiled roof sagging, the wooden doors creaking in the wind. My father had locked it up long ago after a tragic accident, and none of us dared to go near it. But that light, a faint, ghostly yellow, would appear in the darkest hours, then vanish as if someone had just blown out a candle. Fear spread through my family like a plague. My mother started praying more, her eyes always reflecting worry. My father, the strongest and most resilient man I knew, also became withdrawn and quiet. I, just a teenager at the time, could clearly feel the unease gnawing at my soul. One night, curiosity and fear won out. I decided to stay awake to find the source of these strange phenomena. I sat quietly by the window in my room, looking out at the barley field turning a withered yellow under the hazy moonlight. The wind whistled in gusts through the pine trees, creating sounds like mournful cries. As the clock struck midnight, the strange noises began again. First, the horse hooves, still rapid and powerful like the night before, but this time, they seemed closer, as if the cavalry was galloping straight towards the farm. My heart pounded in my chest, and cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I gently opened my bedroom door and stepped outside. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the whistling wind and the frantic thumping of my own heart. I followed the sound of the hooves, my steps trembling on the dirt path leading to the field. The night fog was thick, covering everything and making the scene blurry and frightening. When I reached the middle of the field, the sound of the hooves suddenly stopped. I stood still, trying to see through the mist, but there was only a white expanse all around me. Then, from within the fog, blurry figures began to appear. It was a procession of people riding horses, but their horses didn't seem to touch the ground, gliding silently like ghosts. And the riders, they had no heads. Tattered collars, stained with time, rose above their blurry bodies, and on the saddles, where their heads should have been, there was only a terrifying black void. A horrifying realization dawned on me. The clothes they wore, the old hats, I had seen them in the old photographs hanging on the living room wall. They were the previous owners of the farm, those who had died tragically in accidents or mysterious incidents that the adults in my family used to whisper about. A bone-chilling wind blew past, carrying a strong, foul odor, like damp earth mixed with dried blood. One of the headless ghosts turned towards me, the black void where its face should have been seeming to look right through me. An overwhelming terror seized me, leaving me unable to move or utter a single word. Then, the ghostly procession glided past me, their cold forms dissolving into the night fog. The sound of horse hooves returned, then gradually faded away until only an eerie silence enveloped the field. I stood there, my limbs weak, my heart feeling like it had stopped beating. What I had just witnessed was beyond all imagination, beyond all reason. I knew that that night my family's farm had changed forever. It was no longer a peaceful place but had become a cursed land, forever haunted by the tormented spirits of the past. From that night on, our lives became a long series of days filled with fear and unease. The crops continued to fail and the livestock still died inexplicably. We always felt an unseen presence watching us, the cold gazes of the headless ghosts. Eventually, my family couldn't bear it anymore. We sold the farm for a pittance, accepting the loss of the land our ancestors had painstakingly built. We moved to the city, trying to start a new life, but the memories of Whispering Pines have always haunted me. Even now, every time night falls, I still hear the wind whistling through the trees, and in that wind, I seem to still hear the sound of horse hooves echoing from the empty fields. Along with the bone-chilling cold of that autumn, the autumn when the ghosts awakened and forever changed my life. And I know that no matter where I go, that fear and unease will always follow me, like a never-ending curse. I grew up in the peaceful suburb of Havenwood, Ohio. There, the cornfields stretched out like vast green carpets, rustling in the wind like the sigh of a giant asleep. Summers in Havenwood were always filled with the incessant buzzing of cicadas and the rich smell of damp earth after sudden downpours. My brother, Liam, 3 years older than me, was my constant companion in all our childhood adventures, and our favorite place of all was those endless cornfields. We would spend hours exploring that green maze, creating secret paths between the towering rows of corn, the rustling green walls of leaves concealing us from the world. It was our own private world, where imagination could soar without limits, turning the corn rows into ancient castles, spooky forests, or even distant planets. But in all those adventures, there was one time we saw something that, even now, as I approach middle age, I can't forget. It haunts me like a phantom lurking in my dreams, sowing a cold unease that time itself cannot soothe. That day was a late afternoon in August. The sun had begun its descent, painting the sky with vibrant streaks of orange and pink. We were playing hide-and-seek in the cornfield behind Mr. Henderson's house. I clearly remember the feeling of the dry corn leaves brushing against my hands as I weaved through the rows, the characteristic grassy smell of young corn mingling with the damp earth from the morning rain. Pale yellow sunlight filtered through the gaps in the leaves, creating shimmering spots of light that danced on the ground like eerie will-o'-the-wisps. A gentle breeze blew through the towering corn stalks, creating a mysterious rustling melody, sometimes whispering like someone speaking softly, other times sighing like a mournful breath. I was trying to find a really good hiding spot. Liam had finished counting and was probably searching somewhere nearby. I turned into a small path between two towering rows of corn, hoping to evade him. But then, as I went a little deeper, I inadvertently stumbled into a strange clearing. At first, I thought I had taken a wrong turn, but as I looked closer, I realized this was a completely different area. It was a circular patch of ground about 10 feet wide where no corn grew at all. The ground there was flat and bare, as if someone had meticulously cleared it. The strange thing was, around that clearing, the corn still grew tall and dense as usual, forming a giant green wall surrounding this bizarre empty space. I stopped dead in my tracks, feeling a sense of bewilderment wash over me. Why was there such a perfect clearing in the middle of the cornfield? It was like a scar on the green carpet, a disturbingly unnatural sight. I softly called Liam's name, my voice faltering with surprise and a little bit of vague fear. "Liam, where are you?" A few seconds later, he appeared, pushing his way through the tall corn rows. His face was a little red from running, but when he saw the strange clearing, the smile on his lips vanished. We both stood there in silence, staring at the bare patch of ground. The air in that clearing felt completely different from outside. It was noticeably colder, a bone-chilling cold even though the afternoon was still quite warm. And there was a strange scent lingering in the air. At first I thought it was the smell of damp earth, but then I realized it was slightly sweet, an unpleasantly sweet smell. Yet mixed with a faint metallic tang like the smell of dried blood. That scent crept into my nostrils, causing a feeling of indescribable disgust. We stood there for a long moment, neither of us saying a word. We both felt that something was wrong, an indescribable unease slowly spreading through us. The bare clearing in the middle of the green cornfield, the unusual cold, and that strange scent created a creepy atmosphere, making us feel like we were standing in a forbidden place, a place we shouldn't have stumbled upon. Then, without a word, we both decided to go back. A vague but growing fear urged us to leave that strange place. We pushed our way back through the towering corn rows, trying not to look behind us. Our footsteps quickened, and our panting echoed in the quiet space of the field. Once we were out of the clearing and back among the familiar rows of corn, we finally dared to breathe a sigh of relief. We never told anyone about that strange clearing. Maybe because we were afraid no one would believe us, or maybe because we ourselves didn't want to think about it anymore. But the image of that bare patch of ground in the middle of the green cornfield, the chilling cold, and that strange scent have always haunted me. Even now, living in a noisy and bustling big city, thousands of miles away from Havenwood, sometimes in the quiet of late nights, I still remember that strange clearing. I wonder if it was a sacred place, a doorway to another world, or a sign of something much darker, a terrible secret hidden deep within the soil of Havenwood. Every time summer comes around, when I see pictures of lush green cornfields on the internet, a cold unease rises in my heart. I can never forget the strange and frightening feeling I experienced in that bare clearing, and I always wonder if anyone else in Havenwood has ever seen it. If it's still there, hidden among the towering corn, waiting for someone to inadvertently wander in. Sometimes I even dream about it. In the dream, I'm standing at the edge of that clearing again, but this time, it's not just Liam and me. There are shadowy figures moving dimly in the darkness of the surrounding corn rows. And that sweet yet metallic scent becomes stronger, making me feel suffocated. Then, from the bare earth, something begins to rise, a bizarre and terrifying shape that I can't even describe. I wake up in a panic, cold sweat on my forehead, and my heart pounding as if it wants to jump out of my chest. I know that no matter how many years pass, that strange clearing will always be there, an indelible scar in my mind. It's a reminder of something mysterious and frightening that happened in my childhood, something I could never understand and perhaps should never try to understand. Because sometimes, there are secrets that are best left to sleep forever in the darkness. And that bare clearing in the cornfield of Havenwood is perhaps one of those secrets. I accepted the caretaker job at Oakhaven Farm on the 10th of June. The locals whispered chilling stories about the place, saying it was haunted by tormented spirits. But I've always been a practical person, not easily swayed by tales of ghosts. Besides, I desperately needed the money, and the salary offered by Mr. and Mrs. Ashton, the farm owners, was too tempting to refuse. Oakhaven Farm lay deep within a secluded valley in the English countryside. When I arrived, the main house loomed before me like a gray skeleton, its empty window sockets staring out at the world like dark, vacant eyes. Weeds grew rampant everywhere, moss clung to the stone walls, and a cold, musty odor hung in the air as if the place had absorbed the tears of time. The first 5 days passed in an eerie silence. My job mainly involved some initial cleaning and checking the outbuildings. Everything was old and dilapidated, but nothing unusual occurred. I began to think the rumors were just local gossip, nothing more. On the night of June 15th, I was reading in the small upstairs bedroom when I suddenly heard a cry. That it was the sound of a child weeping, small, heart-wrenching, mournful, echoing from the main house below. That my heart clenched and a coldness spread through my body. I quickly got up, grabbed the old flashlight and cautiously descended the creaky wooden stairs. The weak beam of the flashlight wavered in the darkness. Just enough for me to see shadowy figures flickering on the stained walls. I went through all the downstairs rooms, calling out softly, but only a terrifying silence answered me. It must have just been the wind whistling through broken window panes, I told myself, trying to dispel the rising sense of unease. On June 20th, while cleaning the master bedroom, a large room with a dusty four-poster bed, I found an old diary hidden beneath a loose floorboard. The cover was worn and tattered, the pages inside yellowed with age. It belonged to a girl named Lily who had lived at the farm in the 1930s. The neat handwriting, the ink faded, told of her dull life in such a remote place. But the last entry sent shivers down my spine. Lily wrote about how she often saw a sad woman wandering the farm at night. The woman had long black hair that obscured her face, and her eyes always held a deep sorrow. On June 25th, the crying returned. This time it was clearer, closer, as if someone was standing right outside my bedroom door. The sobs were muffled, filled with pain, making my heart ache. I quickly locked the door, huddled in the corner of the bed, trying to block my ears, but it was no use. The crying continued to reach me, piercing the silent night. Trembling, I picked up my phone, trying to call a few friends, but no one answered. A feeling of loneliness and fear overwhelmed me, like an invisible cage. On the night of June 28th, I saw the sad woman. I woke up in the middle of the night to an unusual coldness. When I opened my eyes, I saw her standing at the end of the hallway, right outside my bedroom door. Her long black hair fell forward, obscuring her face, but I could still sense her empty and sorrowful eyes looking directly at me. An overwhelming terror seized me, leaving me frozen, unable to move or speak. She stood there for a long moment, then slowly vanished into the darkness, leaving behind an eerie silence and a lingering chill in the hallway. July arrived with an increase in strange occurrences. Furniture in the house moved on its own, doors slammed shut unexpectedly, and I constantly heard the sound of crying and faint whispers echoing in my ears. I couldn't sleep, my eyes always wide open, alert to every sound and shadow. I began to doubt my own sanity, wondering if the isolation and fear were driving me mad. July 5th. I have to leave this place. I can't take it anymore. Last night, this sad woman appeared right in my room. I woke up and saw her standing right beside my bed, looking down at me with sad, lifeless eyes. She slowly moved closer and I felt a cold, biting chill envelop me as if the hand of death itself was touching my skin. I don't know what she wants, but I know that I am not safe here. I will leave this diary behind, hoping someone will find it and know what happened at the haunted Oak Haven farm.